In the summer of 1959, Harold and Evelyn Lark drove out of Willow Creek and never came back. For 64 years, the town told a dozen different stories: an affair, a murder, an escape. But when one photograph surfaced this spring, it didn't just reopen the case. It solved it. Just not the way anyone expected. If mysteries of the past and impossible coincidences keep you up at night, subscribe. Because tonight, we're going back to Willow Creek. And we're not coming back the same. It began with a photograph, discovered in the false bottom of a cedar chest during an estate sale on the outskirts of town. The photo was square, glossy, and impossibly well preserved. It showed a young couple standing beside a pale green Chevrolet, sunlight bleeding through the trees behind them. A handwritten date on the border read August 9th, 1959. The buyer, a retired schoolteacher named Alma Hart, hadn't known the house's history when she picked up the box for $5. She only realized the photograph's significance later that night, when she saw the initials scratched faintly in the corner of the print. HL+E. M. Everyone in Willow Creek knew those initials. Harold Lark and Evelyn Moore, the couple who'd vanished that summer. Their disappearance had split the town like a lightning strike. No bodies, no wreck, no trace. Rumor aged into folklore, and folklore into silence. Alma took the photo to the sheriff's office the next morning. The young detective on duty, Claire Danner, studied it for a long time before noticing something strange. In the chrome reflection of the car's fender, a third figure appeared. Faint, distorted, watching. By nightfall, the photograph was locked in evidence, and the case that everyone thought was buried had begun to breathe again. The storm had been building since noon, pressing gray clouds low over the valley. Detective Claire Danner sat in her cruiser on Main Street, rain threading down the windshield, the photograph on the seat beside her. It seemed to hum under the dim light, as if holding its own small weather system. She'd stared at it for hours, the couple smiling beside their car, the forest behind them bright and endless. At first glance, nothing about it felt sinister, but the reflection in the car's fender refused to leave her mind. The shape was wrong. Too tall, too close. By the time she drove out toward the old Lark property, the rain had turned to a steady downpour. The road was a thin ribbon of gravel and memory, lined with barbed wire fences and empty fields. The Lark farmhouse still stood at the end of the lane, half collapsed under decades of neglect. She parked, killed the engine, and listened. Only the ticking of cooling metal. When she stepped out, the air smelled of wet hay and rust. Inside, the house was a mausoleum of small, forgotten things. A calendar frozen on August 1959, a china cup rimmed with dust, a dress folded neatly across a chair as if waiting for a suitcase that never closed. Claire laid the photograph on the table and shone her flashlight across it. In the moving light, the couple's faces seemed to shift, smiles faltering in the shimmer of moisture. She brushed a fingertip along the glossy surface and felt the faintest ridge, a crease that hadn't been visible before. She angled the beam. Under the gloss, 3 penciled words surfaced. He was there. A gust slammed a shutter upstairs. She froze, listening. The sound came again. Wood against wood, slow and rhythmic, not quite wind. She climbed the staircase, each step groaning. At the top landing, she found a door half open. Beyond it, an attic filled with dust and the smell of mildew. Under the eaves sat a trunk identical to the one where the photo had been found. Inside were stacks of newspapers, yellowed letters, and a small Kodak box labeled Developed, August 1959. Her pulse quickened. The negatives inside were intact, curled with age but preserved. She held one strip to the flashlight beam. The same scene, the car, the couple. But in one frame, the third figure was closer, almost beside them. She exhaled shakily. Outside, Thunder rolled across the valley like something turning in its sleep. When she returned to the cruiser, she dialed the number for the county lab. "I need a rush scan," she told the technician. "Priority evidence, cold case reopen." The tech's voice crackled back. "You finally found something on the Lark job?" Claire watched lightning flicker through the rain. "Not something," she said quietly. "Someone." As she hung up, her headlights caught movement in the field. A pale figure slipping between rows of wheat. Impossible in the storm's fury. She stepped out, rain slashing her face, but the field was empty. Only the whisper of the wind and the sense that she was no longer the first to return. Back inside the car, the photo lay where she'd left it, but the reflection in the fender had changed. The third figure was closer now. Rain hadn't stopped by morning. It hung in a steady curtain over Willow Creek, turning the streets to mirrors and the air to fog. In the police lab downtown, fluorescent lights hummed over stainless tables. Detective Claire Danner stood beside the technician, watching as the negatives from the attic unspooled across the scanner's glass. The machine flickered. One frame after another appeared on the monitor. Harold and Evelyn Lark, young and bright, standing beside their Chevrolet. In the distance, a wall of trees shimmered in the summer haze. Nothing unusual. Then the fourth frame loaded, and the room's temperature fell with the frame. The third figure stood at the edge of the frame, half hidden behind a sycamore. Male, broad-shouldered, wearing a brimmed hat. The face was obscured by motion blur, but something about the posture, the tilt of the head, the angle of one arm, made Claire's stomach tighten. He wasn't watching the camera. He was watching Evelyn. The technician, a young man named Walt, leaned closer. "You think this could be the photographer's shadow? Maybe an overexposure?" Claire shook her head. Different axis. The shooter stood 3 feet left of this lens. Walt zoomed in, enhancing contrast. The man's outline sharpened. On his right hand, a glint of metal, a watch or a ring. Beside him, something darker, lower to the ground, almost the shape of a dog crouched in the grass. "Do we know who owned the property back then?" Walt asked. "Larks lived there," Claire said. "No neighbors for half a mile. Closest farm was the Danners, my grandparents, actually." Walt gave a small, nervous laugh. "Guess this case really came home for you?" She didn't answer. Her mind was already racing backward through old stories. Her grandmother's voice, quiet, careful, whenever the name Evelyn Lark came up. The way her father changed the subject, saying, "That was before our time, honey. Let it be, let it be." In Willow Creek, that phrase had buried more truth than dirt ever could. She took the printed scans and left the lab, just as the rain eased to a thin mist. Outside, morning fog clung low to the fields. The Lark property lay 6 miles west, at the bend where County Road 8 met the river. She'd been there last night, but something tugged her back, the need to see the place in daylight. The farmhouse sat like a relic, its roof sagging under moss, its windows dull as cataracts. Claire stepped inside, camera ready. The air smelled of dust and old paper. She moved slowly, her boots creaking across warped floorboards. In the living room, she found the remnants of a photo album scattered across the floor. Most of the pages were blank, but a few prints clung stubbornly to the corners. Family gatherings, picnics, Christmas in black and white. In one photo, Evelyn stood beside a man Claire didn't recognize. Not Harold. Taller, older, his hand resting lightly at her shoulder. The back of the photo was marked in fading ink. Town Picnic, June 1959. Claire slipped it into her folder. Her breath fogged in the chill. Then she heard it, a faint tapping, rhythmic, coming from upstairs. She followed the sound to the master bedroom. The window was open, curtain breathing in and out. On the floor beneath it lay an old Polaroid camera. The film door hung open, empty. Dust surrounded it, except for a single set of footprints leading to the window and stopping there. Claire stepped closer. The footprints were too sharp, too recent. She looked outside. Muddy ground below. No sign of anyone. Then she saw it. Wedged in the window frame, half hidden by rot. Another photograph. She pulled it free carefully. The same car, the same couple. But this time, the woman wasn't smiling. Evelyn's face was turned slightly away, eyes fixed on something beyond the frame. In the glossy reflection of the car's hood, the third figure was no longer distant. He stood between them now. Claire's pulse hammered. She tucked the photo into an evidence bag, sealed it. When she turned back toward the door, she froze. On the dust-coated mirror above the dresser, someone had traced 3 letters with a fingertip. Run. She backed away, heart racing. Downstairs, the wind slammed the front door open, and for an instant she thought she saw a shadow move past the threshold. Tall, still, watching her leave. By the time she reached the car, the mist had thickened into fog so dense the world disappeared beyond the headlights. On the seat beside her, the new photo lay inside its plastic sleeve. The surface had begun to fog, moisture trapped beneath the seal, blurring the edges of the image. But one thing was clear now. In the reflection, the figure's face had started to form. Not blurred, not distant. Smiling and looking directly at her. The fog held until mid-afternoon, smothering the valley like a blanket pulled too tight. By the time Detective Claire Danner reached the Willow Creek retirement home, the air had cleared just enough for the hills to show through. Colorless silhouettes under a silver sky. She parked beside the cracked walkway and sat for a moment, gathering herself. The photo from the Lark farmhouse lay face down on the passenger seat, its edges damp from humidity. She'd stopped trying to make sense of the reflection. Logic bent too easily around fear. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. She signed in at the desk, then followed the nurse down a quiet corridor to room 104. Mrs. Lark doesn't get many visitors, the nurse said softly. Not since her brother passed, but she's sharp, even if she drifts sometimes. Claire nodded. The name alone carried a weight, not Evelyn, who'd vanished, but her younger sister, Ruth Lark. The last person to see Harold and Evelyn alive. Ruth sat by the window, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring at the rain beating the glass. Her hair was white as frost, her hands small and veined like river maps. When she turned, her eyes sparked with something old and fierce. "You're one of them," she said. "Cops." "Detective Claire Danner," Claire said gently. "I wanted to ask about your sister." Ruth smiled faintly, almost sadly. Everyone does. They think if they ask different, they'll get different answers. "I'm not after rumors," Claire said. "Just truth." Ruth nodded slowly. "Truth's heavier than lies, Detective. People drop it when they get tired." Claire took the photo from her folder and laid it on the table. "Do you recognize this?" Ruth's gaze fixed on the picture. Her breath caught. That was the day they left. Evelyn packed a picnic, said they were driving up toward Miller's Bluff to watch the meteor shower. She said they might stop by the river on the way back. Claire leaned closer. "Did she say why they were going alone?" Ruth hesitated. "Because Harold didn't like the man who kept coming around." She said he made her nervous. "What man?" Ruth's hands trembled. "Name was Pierce. Russell Pierce. Worked the gas station out on County Road. But he wasn't just filling tanks, if you know what I mean. Sheriff warned him off more than once." Claire's pen paused mid-note. "You think Pierce followed them?" Ruth's gaze drifted to the window. "I think he never left this town. And I think whatever's in that picture isn't finished." They sat in silence for a moment, the rain ticking on the glass like a clock with no patience. Then Ruth spoke again, voice thinner, distant. "You found their car yet?" Claire frowned. No, not yet. Ruth nodded, as if that confirmed something. Then it's still down there. Where? She looked back, eyes bright with a kind of fever. The river doesn't forget, Detective. It just hides what it keeps. Claire left with the photo pressed under her arm and Ruth's words circling in her head. By dusk, the sky had gone pale gold over the ridge, and the wind smelled of damp earth. She drove toward County Road 7, the old route to the river. The asphalt ended where a dirt path began, winding through willows and cattails. Halfway down, she saw it, a wooden sign split by rot. Miller's Bluff Road. Her headlights swept across the bank where the creek widened into a slow black pool. She parked, stepped out, and felt mud give under her boots. The water was still, thick with fallen leaves. A broken fence post jutted near the edge, and tangled in the wire hung something metallic, a fragment of chrome trim, curved like part of a bumper. Claire crouched, brushing away mud until letters emerged. Chevrolet. She looked down the embankment. In the fading light, she could just make out a faint contour beneath the surface. The outline of a roof, a windshield, the ghost of a car sleeping in silt. Her pulse climbed. She grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Danner. I need a dive team at Miller's Bluff, possible submerged vehicle 1950s model." The radio hissed back with static, then silence. She tried again. Nothing. The air had gone utterly still. Claire stepped back toward the car. The surface of the river shifted once, a ripple spreading outward from the center, as if something beneath had exhaled. In that fleeting moment, the rain began again. Cold, thin needles against her face. She looked once more at the water, and for an instant she could have sworn she saw two faces reflected there. Harold and Evelyn, pale and weightless, watching from below. Then the ripple broke, and they were gone. When she reached her cruiser, the photo had slipped from the folder and landed face up on the passenger seat. Moisture had blurred the ink at the edge, but one word was clear now, new, sharp, and wet. Below. By dawn, the fog had rolled back over the valley, swallowing Miller's Bluff in a pale hush. Detective Claire Danner stood on the riverbank, coffee cooling in her hand, watching divers from the county search team assemble their gear. The water was dark and slow, the kind of silence that carried weight. Deputy Holt, tall and square-shouldered, joined her. "Hard to believe that thing's been down there 60 years, he said. Claire nodded, eyes on the current. "If it's really the Lark's car, it's the oldest open file we've got." The lead diver, a woman named Kelly, slipped her mask into place and gave a thumbs up. Moments later, she vanished beneath the surface. The others followed, bubbles rising in clusters that broke the stillness like clock ticks. The radio on Claire's belt crackled faintly. "Visibility 2 feet. Kelly's voice came through, warped by static. "We've got metal. Large structure. Looks like a vehicle roof." Claire moved closer to the edge. The smell of the river was metallic, sour with silt. "Confirmed Chevrolet emblem," Kelly said. "Green paint. Matched to 1958 Bel Air." Claire's chest tightened. Harold Lark's car had been a pale green Chevrolet. "Can you access the interior?" she asked. A pause. Then Kelly again. Voice lower. "Driver's side window's gone. I'm going in." The seconds dragged. Then, "God, there's someone here." Holt leaned toward the radio. "Say again?" "Remains," Kelly said. "2 of them, front seat. Still belted in." Claire exhaled slowly. The world seemed to narrow until all she heard was the slow roll of the water and her own heartbeat. They worked for hours to raise the vehicle. By noon, the green Chevrolet broke the surface in a torrent of mud and bubbles. Its roof had collapsed inward, windshield shattered. Moss and weeds clung to the fenders like ivy. As the crane lifted it onto the bank, something slid free of the passenger door, a leather satchel swollen with water. Claire caught it before it hit the mud. The clasp had rusted, but she pried it open with her pocket knife. Inside were the remnants of a wallet, a lipstick tube, and a small envelope sealed in wax. The paper had darkened to the color of tea, but the ink was still legible. She peeled it open carefully. Inside, a photograph. Not the one she'd seen before. This one showed Evelyn alone, sitting on a porch step, eyes red-rimmed, hands folded tightly in her lap. Behind her, Harold stood in the doorway, half-shadowed, looking down at her as though deciding something. On the back of the photo, in the same faint pencil as before, "Not an accident." Claire felt the air leave her lungs. She looked at Holt. "We'll need the coroner here." "And a secure evidence locker for this?" He nodded, signaling the team. While they worked, she walked a few yards upriver to clear her head. The rain had stopped, but drops still fell from the trees like the aftermath of tears. She crouched at the water's edge, touching the surface. It was colder than she expected. Beneath, she could just make out a shimmer, something caught in the sediment, reflecting light. She reached in, fingers brushing metal. When she pulled it free, it was a wristwatch, corroded but intact, the hands frozen at 9:14. She slipped it into a bag, labeling it carefully. When she stood again, Ruth Lark's words echoed back to her. "The river doesn't forget. It just hides what it keeps." Hours later, the remains were transferred to the county morgue. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Nandor, was waiting when Claire arrived. He gestured to the table where two shrouded forms lay under white sheets. "We've got identification," he said quietly. "Dental records match Harold and Evelyn Lark." Claire swallowed. "Cause of death?" "Complicated," he said. "Both show blunt force trauma, but not consistent with a crash. No fractures from impact. It's as if the car went into the river already at rest." "Meaning?" He met her eyes. "They were dead before they drowned." The words hung there, heavy as water. Claire opened the envelope again and looked at the photograph of Evelyn on the porch. Her hands in the picture were clasped tightly around something small, a shape that could have been a note or a folded photograph of her own. "Can we enhance this?" she asked. Dr. Nandor nodded. "I'll have the lab scan it tonight." Outside, the sky was bruised purple over the hills. Claire leaned against her cruiser, watching the floodlights shimmer on the river. In her pocket, the wristwatch ticked once. Just once, though the hands never moved. And for a fleeting instant, she thought she saw movement near the waterline. A figure standing ankle-deep in the current, head bowed, as if listening to something beneath the surface. When she blinked, it was gone. The storm broke overnight. By morning, the sky hung heavy with mist, and the air smelled of river mud and gasoline. Detective Claire Danner parked outside the sheriff's office, the Lark case file under her arm. The photograph, the watch, the negatives. Everything had been sealed and logged. But the feeling that the story wasn't over had lodged somewhere behind her ribs, a quiet pressure she couldn't shake. Inside, the station hummed with low conversation. Sheriff Marcus Lane sat behind his desk, the same worn oak his predecessor had used when the Larks vanished. He was a broad man, silver hair trimmed neat, eyes unreadable behind his glasses. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "Would you?" she asked, dropping the folder onto his desk. "The car's real. The remains match, but the trauma doesn't fit a crash. Somebody staged that scene." He flipped open the folder, eyes scanning the photos. "You're saying it was murder. I'm saying someone wanted it to look like an accident." He leaned back, tapping a pen against his chin. "We've had 60 years of ghost stories about this, Danner. You sure you want to chase one more?" Claire met his gaze. Somebody wanted those bodies found now. They could have stayed hidden forever, but something changed. The sheriff sighed. "We can reopen officially, but tread careful. Most of the people who knew the Larks are gone or close to it." "Ruth Lark's still alive," she said, and she gave me a name, Russell Pierce. He frowned. Pierce ran the gas station off County Road 9, left town in '62 after the sheriff questioned him about some thefts. Never came back. Any record of where he went? None that I've found. He closed the file. You think he's still alive? I think his shadow is, she said quietly. That afternoon, Claire drove out to the remains of Pierce's station. The building stood half collapsed, the old Gulf sign rusted to a ghost of orange. Vines had swallowed the pumps. She walked the perimeter, noting the footprints of deer in the mud and the faint smell of oil that lingered after decades. Inside, the air was thick with dust. A single wooden chair sat upright in the center of the floor, as if waiting for someone to return. Behind the counter, she found a cracked ledger filled with dates and names, regular customers from 1959. At the bottom of the last page, one entry stood out, written in darker ink. H. Lark, 8/9, fill plus spare can, no charge. Her breath caught. The day they vanished. She flipped the page, but the rest were blank. When she turned back, she noticed something pressed flat between the pages. A newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle. The headline read, "Gas station attendant questioned in missing couple case." A photograph of Pierce accompanied it. He was tall, lean, with sharp features and a gaze that felt direct even through time. She studied the image. Something about his posture echoed the figure in the reflection. The angle of the shoulders, the tilt of the head. From outside came a creak. Claire froze. A silhouette moved past the window, slow, deliberate. She drew her flashlight and stepped toward the doorway, the beam cutting through the dim interior. Nothing. Only the hum of insects and the whisper of the wind through the grass. She turned back, intending to photograph the ledger, but the chair had shifted, just slightly, angled toward her. Her pulse quickened. She took the picture anyway, hands trembling, and left. That evening, back at her apartment, she spread the photographs across her table, the one of Evelyn on the porch, the new scans of Pierce, the original image of the car. Side by side, they seemed to form a sequence, a story told without words. Evelyn's fear, Pierce's distance, the reflections' approach. She poured a drink and stared at them until the shadows blurred. Around midnight, her phone rang. It was Walt from the lab. "Detective, you're going to want to see this," he said. "We enhanced the porch photo." The object in Evelyn's hands. It's another photo. Zoomed in, you can just make out the image. Looks like Pierce standing by the gas pump, smiling. And get this, the same reflections in his car's fender, too. Claire's stomach turned cold. The same shape. Exact. Frame for frame. Like someone reprinted the same ghost. She didn't answer for a moment. Outside, thunder rumbled far off over the hills. "Walt," she said quietly, "lock the negatives up tight. Nobody touches them till I get there. Already done." When she hung up, the power flickered once, twice, then went out. The apartment sank into darkness. Claire stood by the window, heart beating loud in her ears. In the faint reflection of the glass, her own face stared back, pale, tired. And just behind her shoulder, for a breath of a second, another shape leaned close enough to smile. By morning, the lights were back on across Willow Creek, but Detective Claire Danner felt as if the town itself had dimmed. Every face she passed in the diner seemed older, hollowed by the kind of fatigue that comes from too many stories left untold. She nursed a coffee that had gone cold while rain pressed against the window. When she finally reached the police lab, Walt was waiting with a small envelope. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion. "You remember the negatives from the attic?" he said. "There was a roll we hadn't processed. Different stock. 8mm film. Looks like home movie stuff." Claire followed him into the viewing room. The projector rattled to life, spilling light across the wall. The first seconds were harmless. Children at a picnic, the larks laughing, a radio playing somewhere off screen. Then the camera shifted, turning toward the car. Evelyn sat on the hood, hair lit gold by the sun. Harold stood beside her, joking, waving for the camera. And then, as the film stuttered through its next frames, the same dark figure appeared at the edge of the trees. The lens lingered as if whoever filmed had meant to include him. He raised one hand, almost a greeting, almost a warning. The film jumped, burned, and the screen went white. Walt stopped the reel. "That's it," he said quietly. "But there's something else. The box this film was in. It had a label. Property of R. Pierce." Claire felt a hollow open in her chest. Pierce filmed them. "Looks that way." She stared at the frozen frame on the wall. The figure's posture was unmistakable now. Same angle, same lean. But something about the moment before the film burned, Evelyn's glance toward the lens, looked like fear. "I'll take the box," she said. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray again. Claire drove out of town toward the old cemetery. Pierce's parents were buried there, and she wanted to see the ground herself. The gate hung open, iron hinges squealing. She found their headstones near the back, leaning toward each other like old conspirators. The grave beside them was blank, but freshly disturbed. New earth, no marker. She crouched, brushing away wet soil. Beneath it lay a small tin container. Inside, a roll of undeveloped film wrapped in wax paper. She held it to the light. Faint outlines of images glimmered within. Her phone buzzed. Sheriff Lane's voice came through rough with static. "Danner, where the hell are you? Ruth Lark just passed away at the nursing home. Heart failure. Nurse said she'd been asking for you all night." Claire closed her eyes. The rain thickened, beating against her jacket. "Did she leave anything?" she asked. "An envelope, addressed to you. We'll keep it sealed till you're back." She drove fast, the road slick and narrow. The envelope was waiting on the sheriff's desk when she arrived. Heavy paper, her name written in a frail, shaking hand. Inside, a short note and a photograph. The note read, he told her he'd keep them safe. I think she believed him. The photograph showed the Lark porch again, but in this version, the third figure was standing openly on the step beside Evelyn. Pierce's face was clear now, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Claire turned the photo over. On the back, in fading pencil, she said yes. Her throat tightened. The case that had looked like a double murder now curved toward something stranger, a triangle of fear, promise, and possession. That night she returned to her apartment and unrolled the newly found film. Against the lamp's glow, one frame caught the light. Evelyn sitting at the edge of a riverbank, eyes lowered, the reflection of a man behind her bending toward the water. She could almost hear it, the faint click of a camera shutter, the hush before someone disappears. She packed the film into an evidence pouch and set it on the table beside her coffee. The apartment was silent except for the slow dripping of rain from the eaves. When she turned off the lamp, the window glass filled with the streetlight's reflection. Her own face again, pale and still. But this time, there was no shape behind her, only the suggestion of a shadow walking away down the hall. The next morning, sunlight pushed weakly through the fog, thin as a pulse. Detective Claire Danner sat in her cruiser at the edge of Willow Creek Cemetery, the reel of undeveloped film on the seat beside her. The town was beginning to feel less like a place, and more like a labyrinth of echoes, each discovery leading her further inward instead of out. She drove toward the county archives, the oldest building still standing downtown. Inside, the air smelled of paper and mildew. An archivist named Millie met her at the counter. "I'm looking for any record of a Russell Pierce after 1962, Claire said. Millie adjusted her glasses and began typing. "Let's see. There's a transfer notice, motor vehicle registration canceled that year, and... wait." She frowned at the screen. "A death certificate." Claire leaned forward. "Date. August 12th, 1959. The same week the Larks vanished. But that can't be right, Claire said. If he died after they disappeared, who filmed them that week? Millie turned the monitor slightly. Says here, body recovered from Willow Creek River, presumed suicide, signed by Sheriff Elmer Danner, her grandfather. Claire felt the world tilt. Where was the body buried? Potter's Field, Millie said softly. Unmarked grave. Outside, the day had brightened, but Claire barely noticed. Her grandfather's name on that report meant more than an old signature. It meant complicity, or at least silence. She drove straight to her father's house on the outskirts of town. He was in the yard, repairing a fence, older now but still steady, his movements slow and careful. When he saw her car, he wiped his hands on a rag and sighed. "You're digging up ghosts," he said. "Then tell me why they were buried," she replied. She handed him the file with Pierce's certificate. Grandpa signed off on this. Said Pierce drowned 3 days before the Larks vanished. Her father studied the paper, then looked up at her. He wasn't wrong. They found a man in the river. Face gone, pockets empty. Pierce's wallet washed downstream 2 days later. Everyone decided it was him. No one wanted to look closer, because it was easier, because it was over. She shook her head. No, it wasn't. That car was never found. Until now he hesitated, eyes clouding. Your grandfather used to say the river changes things, that what goes in doesn't come out the same. That's not an answer. He turned back to the fence. Some things you don't answer. You just outlive them. Claire left without another word. The wind had picked up, rattling the bare branches overhead. On the drive back, she passed the old Lark farmhouse. For a moment she thought she saw a figure standing in the doorway. A woman, hair moving softly in the wind. When she stopped the car, the doorway was empty. At the station, Walt was waiting, pale and tense. "We developed the film you found," he said. "You should see this." He led her into the lab and switched on the monitor. The footage was clearer than the first reel, as if preserved intentionally. It opened on the same riverbank, Harold's car gleaming in sunlight. Evelyn stood near the water, holding something behind her back. Pierce's voice, calm, almost tender, came from behind the camera. "You said you wanted proof," he murmured, "that I'd keep you safe. So smile for me." Evie Evelyn turned, her expression unreadable. "He'll find us," she said. "No, he's gone." The camera trembled slightly. Then Evelyn lifted the object she'd been hiding. A pistol, small and nickel-plated. Pierce's voice shifted. "Don't." The frame lurched, the picture fractured into blur and light. When it steadied again, the car door was open, and the lens pointed toward the ground. The last clear image was Evelyn's reflection in the river. Eyes wide, mouth half open, as if realizing too late what she'd done. Then the reel ended. Walt stopped the projector, voice quiet. If Pierce died before they vanished, someone else filmed that. Someone who wanted it kept. Claire stared at the frozen image on the wall. Her pulse felt slow, heavy. Or someone who wanted it finished. Outside the lab window, twilight had deepened. Across the parking lot, the river glimmered faintly through the trees. For the first time, Claire felt it. The pull of it, like gravity. The same current that had kept the car hidden. The same that had taken Pierce. And maybe everyone who'd tried to look too long. She packed up the reel and left the station. By the time she reached the bridge over Willow Creek, night had swallowed the valley. She stopped halfway across, leaning on the rail. The water moved below, calm and black. Her reflection shivered there, joined by another beside it. A man's face, older, blurred by the ripples. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the current carried him away. The next morning broke thin and silver, the kind of light that made everything look like a photograph left too long in the sun. Detective Claire Danner sat in her office surrounded by stacks of evidence bags. The Lark case spread across her desk like a map she was learning by heart. The film reel from the previous night was still running through her mind. Evelyn's reflection, the pistol, the half-formed sound of a man's voice. Claire replayed it again and again until the edges of each frame blurred into a dream. A soft knock at the door startled her. Walt stepped in, holding a sealed envelope. "Came through interoffice mail this morning," he said. "No return address." Claire took it. The handwriting was old-fashioned, the kind that looped like careful stitching. She tore the flap open. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper, folded twice. The ink had bled at the edges, but the words were still legible. "If you found the film, you'll know the truth wasn't mine to keep. The river doesn't lie. Check the post ledgers from August 1959. You'll find what I couldn't bury." E.D.E.D. Evelyn Danner, her grandmother. Claire felt the breath leave her chest. She knew the name by family stories, whispered ones that skipped from truth to myth. Her grandmother had been a friend of the Larks, according to her father, a friend who stopped visiting church after that summer and never spoke of the couple again. She looked up at Walt. "I need access to postal records from 1959. He raised an eyebrow. "Those aren't digitized. You'll have to go to the depot archives. That place hasn't been opened in years. Then we open it." The depot stood on the edge of town, a long wooden structure with boarded windows and ivy crawling up its walls. The smell of damp paper met them the moment they forced the door. Dust floated in shafts of light that cut through the gaps in the boards. Inside, rows of pigeonholes still held brittle envelopes, their corners curled and labels faded. Walt coughed as he brushed off a counter. "Where do we even start?" Claire scanned the ledgers on the desk. One bore the date she was looking for, August 1959. Her gloved fingers turned each page carefully until she reached the middle of the month. There it was. Parcel received, H. Lark, sender unknown. Next to it, a scribbled note. "Hold for pickup," Pierce notified. She stared at the line until it blurred. A package meant for the Larks. Pierce knew Walt leaned over her shoulder. Think it was that film reel? Or something worse? She followed the column to the bottom, where a clerk had added a final entry days later. Unclaimed. Sent to sheriff's office. Sealed. Her heartbeat quickened. The sheriff at that time was her grandfather. They searched the remaining boxes in silence. Near the back, in a drawer warped by water damage, she found a parcel wrapped in wax paper. The label barely intact, but legible enough. Sheriff's evidence. Hold, Danner. Inside lay a stack of small photographs bound with twine. The first showed the Lark farmhouse, sunlit and serene. The next, Evelyn and Harold seated at a table, smiling faintly toward the lens. The third, Pierce standing behind them, his hand resting on Harold's shoulder. But the fourth photo was different. The same table, the same angle, but Harold was gone. Only Evelyn and Pierce remained, her face turned away, his expression hard to read. And the fifth, Claire swallowed hard. The fifth showed a man lying on the riverbank, his face obscured by shadow, the waterline crawling up his shoes. Behind him, someone stood with a camera raised. She flipped it over. On the back, in her grandfather's handwriting, "Do not release." For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Walt's voice came faintly from behind her. "Claire, there's something else in here." He handed her a second envelope. Inside was a short letter on sheriff's stationery, dated August 20th, 1959. To State Records Division, regarding the Lark disappearance. Cease inquiries pending confirmation of vehicle recovery. No foul play suspected. Local evidence sealed per request of Mrs. Danner, her grandmother again. Claire lowered the letter slowly. The room seemed to tilt around her. "They covered it," she said. "She helped him bury it." Walt hesitated. "Maybe she was protecting you." "From what?" He didn't answer. They left the depot as dusk began to thicken across the fields. On the drive back, Claire couldn't shake the image of that last photograph. The hand holding the camera, the body half swallowed by water. Back in her apartment, she spread the prints under the lamplight. For the first time, she noticed something strange. In each photo, no matter how different the setting, the same faint pattern glowed in the reflections. A spiral, almost like the trace of a thumbprint caught in light. She lifted one print closer, tracing the mark with her own thumb. The moment her skin brushed the surface, a static crackle jumped across her fingertip. The photograph shuddered, just a flicker, like something alive under glass, and the spiral darkened. Claire drew her hand back. The air smelled faintly of ozone, the way it had before storms. She turned off the lamp. From somewhere in the apartment, the faint click of a camera shutter broke the silence. By dawn, the rain had passed, leaving Willow Creek washed clean and strangely quiet. Detective Claire Danner hadn't slept. The photographs still lay spread across her table, their glossy surfaces dulled by condensation from her coffee mug. Every image seemed to watch her. When she showered that morning, she caught herself glancing at the bathroom mirror too often. Her own reflection looked slightly delayed, as though the glass were remembering her instead of showing her. At the station, Sheriff Lane was already waiting. He looked tired, his uniform shirt rumpled. "Walt told me about the depot," he said, "and about your grandmother's note." Claire nodded, sliding one of the photographs toward him. "You recognize that?" He studied it. "That's the riverbank behind the old steel bridge. The same spot where they found Pierce's supposed body," she said. "Except this photo was taken before that, which means the body wasn't his." He rubbed his temple. "You're suggesting your grandfather signed a certainty he didn't have. I'm suggesting he might have been told to." Lane leaned back, his chair creaking. "This is getting personal, Claire." It already was. He exhaled. "All right. What's next?" "I want to exhume the grave listed under Pierce's name." He frowned but didn't argue. "Paperwork will take a day or two." "Make it one," she said, and left. The rest of the day unfolded like a series of half-formed memories. The morgue, the courthouse, the damp corridors of county records, all places that had outlived their own usefulness. People she questioned spoke softly, as if afraid of waking something. By nightfall, Claire drove to her father's house again. The porch light burned weak and yellow. He was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. "You were right," she said. "Grandpa buried more than one secret." He didn't look up. "I told you some things don't like being dug up." She set the photograph on the table. "Do you remember this?" His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. "He took that himself." "Your grandfather said it was the last time he'd ever go near that river." "Then who's holding the camera?" Silence. "Dad." Finally, he met her eyes. "Your grandmother." She followed him that day. Said she saw something come out of the water that looked like a man but wasn't. After that, she stopped sleeping. She'd wake up saying she could hear a shutter clicking in the dark. Claire felt a chill crawl down her spine. "You believe her?" He gave a helpless shrug. "I don't know what I believe anymore." Outside, the wind began to rise, scattering dry leaves across the porch. Claire stood. "They're exhuming the body tomorrow." Her father nodded slowly. "Then maybe you'll get your answer. Just be sure you want it." That night, she couldn't stay at the apartment. The silence there felt too aware. She checked into the motel near the edge of town instead, the kind used by highway travelers and truckers. The clerk barely looked up as she signed in. In her room, she laid the photos on the bedspread, studying them one by one. Each seemed sharper now, as if the longer she stared, the clearer they became. The spiral mark glimmered faintly under the lamplight. Her phone buzzed. A message from Walt. "Lab ran spectroanalysis on the prints. The pigment isn't photochemical. It's organic, like skin cells." She stared at the text, pulse rising. The air conditioner clicked off. The room sank into a stillness that hummed just under hearing. She turned toward the mirror above the dresser. Her reflection waited, perfectly still, but behind her shoulder, a pale outline moved. Claire spun, gun drawn. Nothing. Only the empty room, the slow tick of the wall clock. She faced the mirror again. This time the reflection lagged, half a heartbeat slow. When she lifted her hand, her reflection followed late, fingers trembling. Then, behind the mirrored surface, something darker bloomed. The faint silhouette of a man's face, eyes open, expression calm. Claire stepped closer, breath shallow. "Who are you?" No answer, only a low hum, the sound of film running through a projector. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the moment. It was the sheriff. "We've got a problem," he said. "The grave marker's gone. Someone beat us to it." She glanced back at the mirror. The face had vanished, leaving only her reflection, pale and shaking. "I'm on my way," she said. When she reached the cemetery, rain had started again, soft and steady. The ground around Pierce's grave was torn open, the coffin lid pried back. Inside lay only dirt and a crumpled photograph. She picked it up carefully. It showed the motel room, hers, taken from the hallway window. In the reflection of the mirror, her own figure stood watching herself. On the back, written in thin, wavering ink, "See what the camera sees." The rain washed the ink into a blur. The storm rolled in by mid-morning, a gray sheet of water sweeping across the valley. Detective Claire Danner stood at the edge of the cemetery while deputies secured the site. The grave that should have held Russell Pierce was little more than a gouge of wet earth now. Coffin lids split like ribs. Sheriff Lane approached, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "No remains. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were after." Claire nodded, crouching beside the hole. The mud was churned by more than shovels. Long, parallel grooves scored the sides as if something had been dragged out rather than dug up. She took a slow breath. Checked the perimeter. Tire tracks, footprints, anything. The deputies fanned out through the rain. She stayed crouched, eyes tracing the edges of the grave. A faint glint caught her attention. Metal, half buried. She brushed away soil until her glove struck something solid. It was an old key, ornate and rusted, the tag still attached, stamped into the brass. Room 9, Willow Motor Lodge, her motel room. A drop of cold ran down her spine. By noon, she was standing again outside the motor lodge, rain still falling in a steady whisper. The clerk looked up from a small television as she entered. "Something wrong with your room?" he asked. "How many keys to room 9 exist?" He frowned. "2. Yours and the master. I need both." He hesitated but handed over a small ring of keys. "Everything okay, detective?" She didn't answer. She walked down the narrow corridor toward her door. The rain outside tapped against the windows like fingers. Inside, the room looked untouched. But as she set her bag down, the faint smell of soil reached her, wet, mineral, unmistakable. She knelt by the bed. Beneath the frame, something metallic glinted in the shadows. A camera, old, heavy, and still warm to the touch. She lifted it carefully. The film compartment was empty, but moisture clung to the inside of the lens, distorting her reflection in its glass. The phone rang. She jumped, heart hammering. It was Walt. His voice sounded strained. "Claire, I've been going through the chemical analysis on the photos again. That organic material, it's epidermal, human. Someone developed those prints in a bath mixed with tissue." She swallowed hard. "Whose? We can't tell. But it's old. Decades," the line hissed. The connection faltered. She heard a soft click, camera shutter, distant but distinct. "Walt?" Silence. She turned slowly toward the mirror above the dresser. For the first time, she noticed a faint seam along its edge. A panel. She slid her fingers beneath it and pulled. The mirror lifted easily, revealing a narrow recess in the wall. Inside sat another photograph, tucked in a glass envelope. She drew it out. The image showed her standing in that exact room, facing the mirror, holding the photograph she now held. Her breath caught. On the back, a new message, ink still wet enough to smear. The camera remembers. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside, thunder rolled like a slow drum. Claire sank into the chair beside the window, the photograph trembling in her hand. The rain blurred the parking lot into streaks of light. For a moment, she thought she saw someone standing just beyond the glass, tall, hat brim low, watching. She raised her gun, but the figure dissolved into rain. She exhaled, shaky, and called the sheriff. "Lane, it's me." The grave was empty, and whoever took the body left me a message. "They know where I am." "Get out of there," he said. "Now!" She started to reply, but something behind her creaked. The bathroom door. She turned, gun raised. The door stood ajar, a sliver of darkness beyond. The smell of damp soil drifted out. Step by step, she crossed the room. Her reflection moved beside her in the mirror, slightly delayed, lips parted as if whispering something she couldn't hear. When she pushed the door open, she froze. On the tiled floor lay a set of muddy footprints. Bare, small, a woman's. They led to the shower curtain. She pulled it back. Empty. But the drain was clogged, not with hair or dirt, but with fragments of damp paper. She knelt, prying one free. A corner of a photograph, Evelyn's hand reaching toward the lens. The rest was gone. She flushed the drain, but the water refused to move. It swirled once, then stopped. The reflection of her own face breaking apart across its surface. Somewhere beyond the window, another camera clicked. The storm finally broke at dawn, leaving Willow Creek wrapped in a damp, uneasy quiet. Detective Claire Danner hadn't closed her eyes all night. She'd sat at the edge of the motel bed with the photograph still in her hand, the sound of that phantom shudder echoing in her mind. By morning, she'd made up her mind. She packed the camera, the key, and the photographs into an evidence case and drove straight to the station. The air outside still smelled of wet earth and iron. Sheriff Lane met her at the door. "You look like you've been through a war," he said. "Not done yet," she replied. In the lab, Walt was waiting, pale but steady. He held a small package wrapped in wax paper. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Someone dropped this in our after-hours box. No name, no return address." He unwrapped it. Inside lay a roll of 35mm film, handwritten across the leader strip, 1959, last roll. Claire stared at it. Where did it come from? No clue, but it's the same type as the negatives from the Lark attic. I already ran a chemical test. Whatever's on this is fragile. You sure you want it developed? She hesitated only a moment. Do it. They worked in silence, the darkroom red light painting everything the color of blood. As the film unspooled into the developer, images began to bloom in faint gray. The farmhouse, the car, the river. Familiar scenes, ghosts made of silver. Then came one frame that stopped Claire's breath. Evelyn stood beside the Chevrolet, her hand raised in mid-motion, as though waving or warning. The next frame showed her closer to the camera, face drawn, eyes wide. The one after that was nearly black, the lens clouded, but a shape moved faintly in the shadows. A man's face, half lit, half erased. She whispered, "Pierce." Walt leaned closer. "There's more." He advanced the film. The final frame came into focus, a photograph of the river at night. Long exposure, water turned to glass. On the far bank, the reflection of a car's headlights glowed faintly. And in the center of the image, almost hidden in the dark water, was a second reflection. Someone standing there, holding a camera. Claire felt the hair rise on her arms. There's no way this could exist. That reflection is facing us, Walt swallowed. It's like it was taken from behind the lens. When the film was fully fixed and dried, she lifted the strip to the light. The emulsion shimmered faintly, like it was breathing. Walt said, "We can scan it, run enhancement." She shook her head. "No, I need to see it where it was taken." That evening she drove back to the river. The air was still, fog pooling low across the water. She parked at the edge of the bluff where the Lark's car had been raised and walked down to the bank. Every step made the ground softer until the mud sucked at her boots. The current moved lazily, carrying fragments of leaves. She took the film from her coat pocket, holding it against the fading light. The reflections of trees shimmered through the transparent frames. For a long moment, she stood there, the silence so complete, it felt like pressure on her ears. Then she heard it again, the faint, mechanical sound she'd been hearing for days. Click. She turned, nothing but fog. Another click, closer. She raised her flashlight. The beam caught movement at the water's edge, something glinting wetly. She stepped closer and saw the outline of a second camera, half submerged in mud, identical to the one from her motel room. She crouched, reaching for it. The metal was cold as ice. As she lifted it, the lens turned toward her, and for a moment she saw her own reflection inside it, distorted, wide-eyed, lit by her own flashlight. The shutter clicked, and she realized the camera wasn't broken. It had just taken her picture. The beam of light trembled in her hand. She backed away, heart pounding. The camera whirred, ejecting a single damp photograph. It slid into the mud face down. She picked it up. The image was already developing. First gray shapes, then darker tones, until it resolved into something unmistakable. Her, standing in that very spot, holding the photograph. Her voice came out as a whisper. "It's watching." The air shifted, heavy with the scent of rain and rust. Then, from somewhere beyond the fog, a man's voice. Calm, almost gentle. "Smile for me, Evie." The flashlight flickered out. Rain came again before dawn, softer this time, a steady whisper instead of a storm. Detective Claire Danner woke where she'd fallen asleep against the steering wheel, headlights dimming into mist. The camera lay on the seat beside her, silent. Its single-developed photo turned face down beneath a film strip that glowed faintly in the dashboard light. She could have driven away. Instead, she stepped out into the damp chill and walked back down the slope toward the water. The river was still rising from the night's rain, swollen and slow. She stood at the edge where mud met the current, the film strip in her hand trembling slightly in the wind. When she held it to the light, the transparent frames shimmered like windows, and for an instant, she thought she saw movement inside them, faces shifting in silver, the faint outlines of two people walking together through trees, Evelyn and Harold. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I found you." The film stirred in her palm, a faint heat blooming through it. Then, as the wind changed, one final image emerged. The car, the river, and the reflection of a camera pointed not outward, but up, toward the sky. Claire understood then what the photographs had been trying to show all along. Pierce hadn't been the monster they'd made him. He had filmed everything because he'd promised to keep them safe. From Harold's temper, from a town that wouldn't forgive Evelyn for wanting more. The river hadn't claimed them. They had chosen it, together. She dropped the camera into the water. The current took it gently, spinning once before sinking. The surface closed over it without a ripple. When she turned back toward the road, she saw someone waiting at the top of the hill. Sheriff Lane, his coat dark with rain, holding a folder under his arm. "You all right?" he called. She nodded. It's done. He looked past her toward the river. What did you find? The truth, she said quietly. And what it cost them to hide it. They stood for a moment watching the light break through the clouds. When the sun finally touched the surface of the river, the water turned to glass, and for just a heartbeat, Claire thought she saw them there. Evelyn and Harold, hand in hand, walking away from the camera's gaze. Then the reflection dissolved into light. That afternoon, she filed her report. Case 59-147, closed. Cause of death, undetermined. Verdict, peace. She placed the final photograph in the evidence envelope and sealed it. On its back, she wrote 3 words that felt like both ending and forgiveness. Let them rest. When she left the station, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Willow Creek glowed gold along the riverbanks. Children rode bikes down Main Street where the fog used to hang. For the first time, the air smelled not of rust or rain, but of something new, like the world exhaling. The photograph never made it to the archives. Months later, when the evidence room was inventoried for transfer, the envelope marked Lark Case was missing. In its place lay a single snapshot, newly printed, glossy and untouched by age. It showed the river under sunlight, calm and endless. A woman standing at the edge with her back to the camera. Her hair moved gently in the wind. In the reflection across the water, 2 shapes walked away together through the trees. Beneath the image, someone had written in clean blue ink, "The camera remembers, but the river forgives."